Well, it's lovely to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for coming. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what it is to be sort of a field biologist in the current day and age. So since leaving OLA in 2007, I've been fortunate enough to actually conduct a lot of field work, working with loads of different animals all over the UK and around the world, and working with some really great institutions. Here are just a few examples of some of my favourite things. I've been able to do some work looking at puffin populations off the coast of Wales, and even doing things like analysing how smell affects mating in lizards. However, I'm not going to talk about any of those things today. I'm actually going to mainly focus on the work that I've been doing over the last couple of years during my PhD. So I want to introduce you a little bit to the topic of my PhD, tell you a little bit about the realities of fieldwork, but probably most importantly, I'm hoping that in the next 15 minutes I can get most of you to think a little differently about wasps. So the evolution of social behaviour has been a major transition in evolution. It's shaped the natural world in which we live. It's created new levels of biological organisation. But in order for animals to become sociable, it involves lots of independent units coming together, becoming integrated into a higher level of organisation known as the society. And we find sort of social behaviour throughout the animal kingdom. So right from social slime moles, through to cooperatively breeding birds and mammals, and yes, we're definitely including mammals, and humans are some of those as well. And also we find lots of social behaviour throughout the insects. So the most extreme forms of social behaviour in insects are found within a group called the Hymenoptera, which is what I work on, or the so-called social insects. And this is the bees, the ants, and the wasps. And so what these insects show is an extreme form of altruism. So what I mean by this extreme form of altruism is that you find that you have individuals who give up their chance to reproduce and have offspring in order to help another individual do so. Now, this is considered quite bizarre in evolution because, in general, we consider plants and animals will want to maximize the amount of reproduction they do in order to let their genes carry on through into the future. Another way that we can characterize these organisms is by these three things: so a cooperative recare of young, overlapping generations, and a division of labour. So remember that last one, because it's going to come back in later. So the fact that we've got this bizarre system of this extreme behaviour in these insects has led a lot of people to question it. Even Darwin, in The Origin of Species, was wondering why this type of behaviour existed. So it's triggered a lot of research in biology so that we can try and understand this system. And one of the potential solutions that was come up with is the idea of what's called kin selection. So as a bit of science for you all this evening, I'm going to try and explain how kin selection theory works. And to start off with, I'm going to explain how relatedness works amongst us, amongst humans. So here's a picture of my parents, who are sat over there. And they are what are known as diploid organisms. So what this basically means is that they have developed from a fertilized egg, and they also have two sets of chromosomes. So as a quick reminder, just basically chromosomes are structures where all of our DNA is sort of stored, which basically means that they contain all of our genetic information. So my parents then had me. I'm also a diploid organism, so I developed from a fertilized egg, and I have two copies of all of my chromosomes. And I inherited one of these randomly from my mum, and one of these randomly from my dad, which means that I'm related to both of my parents equally by 50%. If I had a sibling, which I don't, they would also be diploid. They would also randomly inherit one of these from mum, one of these from dad, and so I would also be related to them by 50%. However, this situation then changes when we come to looking at the social insects. So I've got some ants here as an example. I've got a male over here and a female over here. So the female ants are just like us. They're diploid organisms, developing from a fertilized egg with two copies of all their sets of chromosomes. Males, however, are what is known as haploid. Now, this means they actually develop from an unfertilized egg. So essentially, they only have one parent, their mother, which means they only actually have one set of all their chromosomes. So again, let's take an example. Say they have a daughter. They're going to have this female here. She's going to be a diploid, and she's going to inherit one of these randomly from her mum, and she's also going to inherit this set from her father. So she's going to be, just like I am to my parents, equally related to them by a half. Say, for instance, they have another daughter. So this individual here has now got a sister. This individual here is going to inherit randomly one of these, but it's going to inherit exactly the same set as her sister from her dad. And this means that she's actually going to be related by 75% to her sister. So as I said before, males only essentially need one parent because they develop from an unfertilized egg. So say, for instance, this female over here had a son. He's going to inherit one of these. And his sisters are going to be related to him by only 25%. Let's take our focal ID female here. Say, for instance, she has some offspring. Just like me with my parents, both of her offspring are going to randomly inherit one of these. Whoever their father is, they're going to inherit that one as well. And that means that she's related to her offspring and her to them by 50%. So the quick mathematical-minded people will have noticed that in the ants, actually sisters are more highly related to one another than they are to their parents, their brothers, and their own children, which means, in biological terms, it's better for you to help raise your sisters than it is for you to have your own children. So that can explain why this type of behaviour arises. So it's better to do this. Okay? So as I mentioned before, the division of labour is one of the key characteristics that these insects show. And this unusual degree of relatedness has meant that within sort of colonies of insects, all these sisters develop specific roles that allow them to function. And scientifically, we call these roles castes. And the sort of amount that these castes differ within social insects helps us to define their level of social complexity. And it ranges from simple social species through to sort of advanced social species. Now, in general, advanced social species are considered to have what are called morphological castes. And what this basically means is the castes look different from one another. So most ants are considered to be morphologically caste determined, and they also are advanced species. So if we have a look up here, these are all individuals from the same ant colony. And just from looking at them, you can see they're all really different from one another, and they're designed perfectly for their roles. So we've got the queen. She's really big, designed for producing lots of eggs. We've got a female soldier here. She's got a big head, big jaws for defending the colony. And then we have different varieties of workers. So again, all sisters who help carry out the work in the colony. So then if we go to the other end of the spectrum, we have what we call the simple social species. And this is where my work comes in. So this is a nest of paper wasps. And as I hope you can tell from looking at that nest, everyone looks completely identical to one another. There's no clear differentiation as we see in the ants. However, they still have just a well-defined caste system, except that this system and their roles are determined through their behaviour rather than from how they look. So the only way we can see what role they are is if we sit and we watch them. And what makes this system really cool is that because it's behavioural, it can change. So this means that these individuals are flexible throughout their lifetime and they can swap roles. So if we remove the queen from this colony here, there'll be a big fight, but someone else will take her place and change the role. So this brings me on to talking about the species I'm currently working with. This is Pilistes canadensis, the paper wasp. And as with other paper wasps, every single individual on a nest looks like everybody else. But if we sit and we watch them, we can see the really well-defined role system going on. So for part of my PhD, I'm trying to investigate how flexible these roles really are. Can everybody swap? And so I'm seeing what factors can either promote or prevent your chance of changing as an adult. So unfortunately, we don't have any paper wasps in the UK. Which means I have to go abroad to do my research. And you find my wasps throughout Central and South America, but in particular, I work with them in the Republic of Panama. So if we have a zoom in on a bit of Panama, I work over here on the East Caribbean coast, and that's in the province of Colón. And whilst I'm actually in Panama, I work in conjunction with the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. They have 9 really big research facilities throughout Panama, and one of which is in this part of the country. Obviously, most people, when they think of Panama, think of this, the Panama Canal. And so as you can see, where I work over in this area of canal, it completely is divided by the canal itself, which means I frequently have to cross it to get to my field sites, which means I see plenty of these all the time, absolutely massive ships, as well as some of the really hugest ports in the world. Looks amazing when you're trying to get to work in the morning and you've got to wait for an hour for a boat to go through the locks. It's not quite as fun. So, as I'm sure many of you are aware, for a long time, Panama was actually occupied by the US, who wanted to gain access to the canal. And it was only actually 14 years ago, in the year 2000, that actually Panama was given back to the Panamanians. So as a result of this occupation, all the way along the coastlines, along the canal, in the rainforest, you actually find a lot of old US military bases. And these military bases have now completely abandoned. None of the Panamanians use them, and they've become a complete haven for populations of wasps who nest in all of the rafters. So we've now decided that this is the perfect place to study them. So we're all in the field, we're all ready to go. However, we've got a few things to think about before we get started. So we're about to work with some wasps, so I'm not going to go dressed like this. You have to be covered from head to foot the entire time to prevent being stung. We also have to wear these very sexy items of kit. This is my bee hat. Very lovely. So obviously we put this on as well to prevent ourselves from being stung, so protecting my face. But the other thing is we also have to handle the wasps. So in order to handle the wasps, we have to wear gloves. So unlike some of the gloves that lots of beekeepers wear in the UK, they're a bit too thick. We can't actually handle the wasps very well. So we found that actually wearing rubber gloves is the best thing to do. However, I just want you to imagine that it's 40 degrees, 80% humidity, you're working 12, 14 hours a day in this heat. There are mosquitoes around, it's hot, it's sticky, and you're wearing rubber gloves. So obviously you can imagine how horrible your hands feel, and I will just leave you to imagine the smell when you take the glove off at the end of the day. But here we go, it's a picture of the wasps on the nest. But the reason we do all of this is because of this. They do sting and it really hurts. So this is the reason why we wear all of the stupid outfits. So I'm just going to show you through now actually kind of a day-to-day basis what it is that we actually do when we're in the field. So first of all, we're all ready to go. But what we need to do is actually we want to mark the wasps. So what we do is we go up to the nest with a pair of forceps. We grab the wasps. They're not always terribly happy with that option. And then you pick them up and you hold them in your hands. So the reason we do that is so that we can mark them. So here we go. I'm holding a couple of wasps now, two at once. And what we do is we basically glue little tags onto their back. So here we are. She's not looking terribly happy with me. So we put a little bit of glue on the back. It is non-toxic, just to point it out. And then what we do is we take these. So these are numbered tags, they're coloured and they have lots of individual numbers on them. And what's really great about this is it means that we can uniquely identify hundreds of wasps in the field. So typically in a field season, I'll mark about 400 to 500 of these wasps. And it means that I can track that individual throughout her whole life. I can see where she goes, what she does, and who she interacts with through the behaviour. So here we go, just pick it up again, then pop it on her back. Right way around. And they're really light. They weigh maybe about a gram. We've found it has no effect on their ability to fly at all. So there she is. She's nice and navel nice. So she's now blue 75 the rest of her life. And the reason, obviously, we want to mark all of these is so that we can watch their behaviour. And if we don't watch their behaviour, we can work out what they're doing. So as I mentioned before, we've got a leader of the colony. So we've got the queen. And she asserts her authority by being dominant and aggressive on the nest. So as you can see here, she's shaking her abdomen around like this on the nest. So that's creating vibrations, and she's kind of showing everyone else that she's in charge, she's the boss. Another way that she keeps in control is by attacking all the other individuals. So as you can see, she's about to go and bite this other wasp on the head. So obviously they weren't doing something she liked, and so she decided that she would go and punish them by biting them. Another way that we can tell who's our queen on the nest is that she is the only individual who will actually lay any eggs on the nest. So if you see a wasp doing this, so this is an individual, she's about to stick her abdomen right up inside a cell. So she's now laying an egg. So we can be pretty, almost 100% certain that she should be the queen on our nest. So we can say pink 7 is our queen. But obviously, as I mentioned before, we don't just have the queens, we have all the workers as well. Now, they all have other really specific roles for the colony. So if we also know there's a wasp about to land, who's got an absolutely giant load of food, so they've been out foraging, she's caught some prey, and the minute she arrives on the nest, everyone else will jump on board, and they'll start taking that apart, and they'll start sharing it out amongst themselves. So what they're going to do now is once they've all processed all the food, they will go around and they will check all of the larvae within inside the nest, and they'll see who needs food. And they do this all the time. They stick their heads in and out, and they'll see if they're thirsty, if they're hungry, and they'll feed them and give them water as appropriate. So they'll munch on that for a while. So obviously, we can see that they've all got these really specific roles, and even within the workers, they all carry out very specific tasks. So some individuals will purely forage for food, for water. Other individuals even have the job of keeping larvae cool. So if you have a look at these nests, you can see that some of these individuals have got their wings out doing this. And so it's because it's a hot day, and the larvae are getting overheated. So they will literally stand over the larvae and fan them. So once I've done all this marking and I've done my behaviour, I can then start to run some experiments. So what I generally tend to do is remove key individuals, and I see how the rest of the members of the nest cope with that happening, and I see if they are able to change their behaviour accordingly. So obviously, I do spend the vast majority of my time in Panama working with these wasps, but it's also really exciting to be working somewhere that's so naturally biodiverse. It's the land bridge between North and South America, so you get huge amounts of movements. So I just wanted to share with you, just as I finish off, some pictures of some of the other animals that I get to see on a daily basis whilst I'm working out there. So here we've got a howler monkey with her little baby in the middle. We have lots of really cool varieties of things like bats. I'm very fortunate to be working out on the Caribbean coast. So obviously, not only do I have rainforest, but I also have some amazing sea life as well. Beautiful butterflies flying through the forest. Some amazing birds. So we've got some eagles here. Not only is it the animals, but the plant life is also really amazing as well. So you get all these fantastic flowers and also some of these massive trees. Things like toucans, which are absolutely gorgeous, and my all-time favourites when I'm out there, which is the sloths, which are absolutely gorgeous. Look at that guy's face, isn't he cute? But obviously, when I'm away on fieldwork, I don't do it all by myself. I have a lot of help from a lot of willing volunteers who come out and work with me in the field as well. So I'd like to sort of say a big thank you to lots of those people as well. So I've got my 2 supervisors at the University of Bristol, Syrian and Andy, all my willing victims/colleagues who come out to help me, and of course, all the people who help fund my research. So just as I'm about to finish off today, I said 15 minutes ago that I was hoping I might have made some of you think a little bit differently about wasps. So I just want to finish with a quote from one of our very famous sociobiologists, W.D. Hamilton, who has this to say: "Social wasps are among the least loved insects, yet where statistics will not alter a general impression, another approach might. Every school child ought to sit watching a Polistes wasp nest for just 1 hour. I think few would be unaffected by what they see. It is a world human in its seeming motivations and activities, far beyond all that seems reasonable to expect from an insect. Constructive activity, duty, rebellion, mother care, violence, cheating, cowardice, and unity in the face of threats. If mere insects could be so human, what of all the rest?" Thank you very much for listening.